Hello. Tonight we settle in together for a long, quiet journey. 170,000 years, resting under the same stars that still hang above your window. From the first small band of cousins who carried a glowing coal across an African valley, all the way to the evening in 476 AD, when a boy emperor laid down his crown in a garden near Ravenna, everything that truly happened is going to pass by like slow clouds. So, before we begin, take a moment to like the video and subscribe if you'd like to hear more stories like this. And if you feel like it, leave a comment with where you are in the world right now and what time the clock says there. It's nice to know the same tale is brushing against different night skies. The fire we follow tonight is very old, older than any city, older than metal or writing. It started when someone cupped a spark in dry grass and decided tomorrow was worth carrying it forward. That tiny decision is still warm in every lamp and screen that lights your room. Somewhere ahead, quiet rivers will turn into the Nile and the Euphrates. Mud villages will grow tall brick walls. A princess will sign her name on wet clay. Pharaohs will ask stone to remember them forever, and a young king will ride so far east that even the horizon grows tired. All of it is waiting, patient as moonlight on still water. Now, dim the lights, let the room settle, and let's drift into tonight's journey together. The night is very large, and the first fire is very small. A woman cups glowing moss in her palms somewhere in eastern Africa, maybe 2 million years ago. The ember breathes with her own breath. That is the beginning. Homo habilis has already shaped the first sharp stone, an Alduin chopper, simple as a river pebble broken on purpose. The edge fits the hand the way wind fits a valley. Time drifts forward. The fire travels. Homo erectus carries it in a slow arc out of Africa, across warm sands and dry grass, all the way to a cave mouth at Zhoukoudian near Beijing 800,000 years ago. You can almost smell the faint cedar smoke curling under limestone. They sit together, a small band of 20 or 30, passing roasted horse meat beneath a sky that has no names yet. Much later, perhaps 300,000 years ago, at Jebel Irhoud in Morocco, the faces looking into that fire already look like ours. Broad foreheads, small brows, eyes catching the light the same way yours do now. Homo sapiens has arrived, quiet as moonlight on still water. They walk, always walking. Along the Nile Valley, across the green Sahara when it was still wet, over the Bab el-Mandeb Strait into Arabia when the sea was lower. By 120,000 years ago, someone stands on the shore at Mislia Cave in Israel, holding a Levallois flake sharp enough to cut hide as soft as dusk. The great cold comes and goes. Ice sheets swell and shrink like slow breathing. 70,000 years ago, a campfire flickers at Blombos Cave south of Cape Town. Someone presses red ochre into a shell, mixes it with charcoal and fat, and draws cross-hatch lines on a stone, the oldest known drawing. Nearby, tiny perforated shells once hung around a neck that has turned to dust, yet the holes remember the thread. 45,000 years ago, the first of them step into Europe, the Aurignacian folk. At Hohlefels in Germany, a carver shapes a small mammoth ivory horse, no longer than your thumb. Its mane flows like quiet water over stone. In the Chauvet Cave in France, 36,000 years ago, charcoal lions watch from the walls with eyes that never blink. Torches carried deep underground leave black soot that still clings today. Across the open plains of Siberia, they keep moving, wrapped in sewn fur against the dry grass wind. By 15,000 years ago, a few cross Beringia, where a land bridge lies beneath moonlight, and the Americas open like an empty plain waiting for footprints. At Monteverde, in Chile, 12,500 years ago, they tie knots in seaweed rope and build wooden huts near cold water flowing over stones. Everywhere, the same small fires. In Japan, at the Minatagawa, cracks on Okinawa, in the Naya caves of Borneo, in the rock shelters of Arnhem Land, the glow is always the same size, warm enough for 8 or 10 people to lean in and feel the night soften. They know the animals better than we know our neighbours, the way aurochs move at dusk, where ibex sleep when salmon crowd the rivers. A quirky thing. At Dolny Vjestnica in Moravia, 26,000 years ago, someone pressed clay around a stick and baked the first ceramic figurines in the coals. Little Venus shapes with generous hips, perhaps tucked into a pouch for luck. Hand stencils cover walls from Sulawesi to Spain. A mouth blows red pigment around an open palm, leaving the ghost of a hand that once held a child's fingers. Historians still argue whether those prints marked territory or hunting magic, or simply said, "I was here beneath these stars with you." The nights are long, stories begin, though no one writes them down. A constellation rises, someone points, a low voice names it, the name is gone, but the pointing remains in our bones. And the fire keeps moving, carried in slow hands across every continent except the frozen one at the bottom. 2.5 million years of footsteps, and still the same small circle of warmth against the dark. 10,000 years ago, the great ice begins its last quiet retreat. Mammoths vanish into the warming distance. Forests creep forward where tundra once lay. The world is changing its mind about cold. Something new waits just ahead, patient as embers under ash. The great ice breathes out one last time, and the world grows gentler. Around 9,600 BC, the younger Dryas chill loosens its grip. Forests of birch and pine slide forward across land that once knew only reindeer moss. Water rises quietly in the north, cutting the British Isles away from the continent with a soft, steady hush. People notice the change the way you notice warmth returning to a room. They begin to linger. Along the shores of the Baltic, at Starkar in northern England, a small camp stays season after season. Red deer antlers become picks and barbed points. Beaver teeth slice wood, and someone wears a headdress of 21 deer skulls for reasons the wind has forgotten. The faint scent of dry grass drifts over low platforms built above the wetland, platforms that feel almost like choosing a place. Farther south, where the Danube spills into the iron gates, the river narrows between cliffs. At Lepensky Ver, around 9,500 BC, families shape triangular houses with floors of red limestone plaster. Fish swim thick in the eddies below, sturgeon and carp heavy enough to bend a spear shaft. They carve boulders into strange, human fish faces that stare forever at the water flowing over stones. In the east, along the Nile, at Jebel Sahaba, the river gives so much that people quarrel over fishing spots. Some bones carry little stone points still resting inside them, quiet reminders that plenty can sometimes make room for anger, yet most nights the fires stay peaceful. On the coast of Portugal, the Tagus estuary fills with shellfish. Midden heaps grow slowly at Cabeço da Arruda, layer upon layer of clam and oyster shells. A soft hill that smells of salt even now. A quirky thing. Someone buries their dogs with the same care they give their own dead, wrapping a puppy in red ochre and laying a polished stone beside its paws. Across the Levant, the Natufian folk have already learned the trick of staying. At Ain Malaha, round stone houses sink a little into the earth. Storage pits lined with plaster hold wild wheat and barley gathered from nearby slopes. They harvest with sickle blades of flint set into bone handles that shine from long use, and when someone dies, they tuck gazelle horn cores beside the skull, perhaps so the spirit runs swift in whatever comes next. Historians still argue whether these Natufians were the very first to plant a handful of seeds on purpose, or whether the idea simply drifted in later, the way warmth drifts in after winter. The world is smaller now, softer. Microlith stones no bigger than your thumbnail fit neatly into wooden shafts. Arrows whisper where spears once thudded. Bow and arrow travel from hand to hand across continents like a quiet rumour. And everywhere, the same small fires. Only now they burn in the same place for years instead of days. Smoke rises above the same patch of earth long enough for moss to remember the smell. Something is gathering, like water behind a beaver dam. One morning, perhaps around 9,500 BC, in the rolling hills above the Jordan Valley, a woman kneels where the wild wheat grew thick the year before. She presses a few fat grains into the turned earth with her thumb, the way you might push a loose stone back into place. The gesture is small, but it changes everything. That place is called Gilgal Tower, a low circle of stones already watching over the first fields. Nearby, at Netiv Hagdud, barley and emmer begin to grow in neat patches instead of wherever the wind dropped them. In the pre-pottery Neolithic A, people still live mostly on gazelle and gathered pistachio, yet the idea has taken root. By 8,500 BC, Jericho has walls, thick stone walls 8 feet high, and a tower taller than any house, standing quiet under moonlight like something the night itself asked for. Farther north, along the middle Euphrates, Göbekli Teperin rises even earlier, great T-shaped pillars dragged upright in rings, some carved with foxes and scorpions that seem to move when the firelight flickers. The enclosures are filled and abandoned again and again between 9,600 BC and 8,000 BC, long before anyone plants a single seed nearby. Historians still argue whether the need to feed hundreds of builders pushed people toward farming, or whether farming simply gave them the free time to raise such silent stone circles. Either way, the granaries come. At Çatalhöyük in central Anatolia, around 7,500 BC, flat-roofed houses crowd so close you walk across rooftops to visit a neighbour. Under the floors, the dead rest curled beneath low benches. Painted skulls watch the living with shell eyes. Ladders lean against cool plaster walls, and every household stores its own wheat and lentils in clay bins that smell faintly of dry grass. Some bins are larger than others. In the Levant, plaster floors appear, smooth, white, sometimes polished until they shine like still water. At Ain Ghazal they mould life-size statues with bitumen eyes that stare out from abandoned houses left behind when the land grew tired. A quirky thing, someone at Jericho buried a man with his head removed after death, replaced by a careful face of plaster, features gentle and calm. Across the Zagros foothills, goats learn to follow people home. At Ganj Dareh, around 8,000 BC, the pens fill first with kids that no longer run away. Sheep follow soon after. Milk begins to matter. In the Indus Plain and the Yellow River Valley, the same quiet decision happens almost at the same moment, though no runner carries the news. By 7,000 BC, Mehrgarh in Balochistan already has mud brick houses in neat rows, cotton seeds in the fields, and granaries raised on stone foundations so rats walk underneath and cannot reach the grain. Some families own more rooms, more jars, more painted pottery with simple geometric lines. The days grow longer, not in hours, but in worry. Fields must be guarded, weeds pulled, water led through small channels that glint under moonlight. Children who once chased grasshoppers now carry water jars twice their height. Teeth wear down from grit in the bread, joints ache sooner. Yet the village grows. 20 hearths become 200. Some people walk away, back to the old freedom of light packs and distant fires. Most stay. Staying means surplus. Surplus means some hands no longer need to work every sunrise. Those hands begin to shape finer beads, taller pots, copper beads melted in small crucibles at Cheonu, the first metal to shine like captured fire. And quietly, without any announcement, some families own more animals, more grain, more beads than others. The difference is small at first. An extra necklace, a larger house, a burial with 10 pots instead of 2. But it is there, resting under the same stars that once saw everyone equal, around a single small flame. The world has learned how to grow and how to keep. Between the two rivers, the land is flat and quiet. Reeds whisper along slow channels, and the sun leaves long shadows on the water. Around 4000 BC, a village called Eridu lifts its small temple higher than any house, 7 times rebuilt on the same spot until the platform stands like a low hill made of human memory. The scent of cedar smoke drifts from the first brick kilns. A little farther north, Uruk begins to breathe louder. By 3500 BC, the city already covers 250 hectares. Mud brick walls 6 miles around. Canals bringing water straight through the streets, so boats tie up at doorsteps. From the air it would look like a soft honeycomb glowing in the late sun. Inside, perhaps 50,000 people move along narrow lanes. Potters, weavers, brewers of barley beer, men carrying fish in wet reed baskets. Their voices rise and settle like birds at dusk. At the centre waits Eanna, the temple district of Inanna. Whitewashed walls, steps wide enough for processions that have not yet learned how to march. On the highest platform, the white temple catches the last light, simple and clean, its corners perfectly square against the wide sky. And nearby, something new is happening. In a quiet room that smells of river clay, someone presses a reed stylus into a soft tablet the size of a hand. First come the pictures: a reed bundle, meaning barley, a cow's head, meaning cattle, a jar, meaning oil. By 3400 BC, the marks grow simpler, wedge-shaped, turning slowly into what we call cuneiform. The earliest tablets are only accounts. 60 litres of barley paid to 6 workers, 30 sheep received from the herdsman Enkar. But the idea is born that a moment can be caught and kept longer than speech. A quirky thing. Among the thousands of dull receipts, archaeologists found one tiny school exercise. A boy named Enimgal practiced the sign for bread 20 times in crooked rows, then added a single line: "I am tired." The tablet was baked hard in a fire nobody meant to start, and the complaint drifted 4,000 years to reach us. The city needs these tablets the way lungs need air. Temples own huge fields and workshops. Priests in long wool robes keep track of every jar, every sickle blade. Every day a woman works spinning flax. The first known named official is a woman called Amma-A, from around 3100 BC. Her seal shows her leading a line of prisoners, though the scene is calm, almost gentle. Trade moves along the rivers. Boats of bundled reeds carry obsidian from Anatolia. Lapis lazuli, the colour of deep night from Badakhshan. Copper from Magan across the Gulf. In return, Uruk sends rolled linen cloth so fine it feels like warm sand under moonlight. Somewhere in Susa, far to the east, they copy the new writing on local clay. The habit spreads quietly, like water finding its level. Historians still argue whether Uruk ruled the smaller towns as an early state, or whether the towns simply looked to the great city the way children look to an older sibling. Either way, the world's first city has grown so large that no one person can know every face inside the walls. The days of sitting around one small fire are over. Yet at night, the streets grow quiet again. Lamps of sesame oil flicker in doorways. A baby cries somewhere. A dog barks once and thinks better of it. From the high temple terrace you could see the plain stretching away, dark and endless, dotted with the tiny glow of distant villages that have begun to copy everything Uruk does. The rivers keep flowing, carrying the soft sound of oars and the faint scent of cedar smoke toward tomorrow. The city of Ur shimmers in the warm evening light, its great ziggurat rising step by step toward a sky the colour of lapis. Around 2285 BC, a woman walks slowly up those baked brick stairs, linen robe brushing the warm surface, moon disk pendant catching the last glow of sun. Her name is Enheduanna, daughter of Sargon, high priestess of Nanna the moon god, and the first person in history to set her own name at the end of what she wrote. In the quiet upper rooms that smell faintly of cedar smoke, she lifts a reed stylus. The clay tablet waits, soft as river mud. She writes the exaltation of Inanna, 42 careful lines that call the goddess Lady of Blazing Dominion and Lioness who roars over the mountains. The words feel like embers settling into the clay, still warm, after 4,000 years. Another hymn follows, the Inin Mehusa, and then many more. Some nights the temple scribes copy her verses onto fresh tablets so the singers will remember every breath. When she finishes, she presses her cylinder seal into the damp edge. Enheduanna, the true high priestess. A quirky thing, on a broken alabaster disc found in the Jiparu residence, she stands between two attendants, hand raised in greeting, the earliest portrait of a writer we have. The stone is worn smooth, but her name is still clear. Historians still argue whether she composed every line herself, or shaped older temple songs into something new. Either way, her signature changed everything. From now on, words could belong to someone. Down in the courtyard below, the evening offering fires burn low. Quiet water flows through the sacred canal, carrying petals and the faint scent of incense toward the dark plain. Her voice drifts on, long after the city itself has fallen silent. The moonlight is soft on the wide plain, and the new ziggurat of Ur rises clean and straight, its corners catching silver like quiet water over stones. Around 2100 BC, a king named Ur-Nammu walks the construction site at dusk, linen kilt brushing against fresh brick, watching thousands of men lay each layer higher for the moon god Nanna. He has already dug long canals that still carry water to fields far beyond the city walls, and now he wants something else to last. In the cool scriptorium that smells faintly of cedar smoke, scribes shape a tall shale stele, 7.5 feet of smooth stone. On it they carve the Code of Ur-Nammu, the earliest law code we have found. The lines are gentle but firm. If a man knocks out another's tooth, he pays half a mina of silver. If a slave escapes, and is returned, the finder receives 2 shekels. A widow keeps her husband's house. False witness costs 15 shekels, the weight of a small loaf carried home under moonlight. At the top, the king himself sits on a low stool while the god Nanna places a measuring rod and coiled rope in his hands, the quiet tools of justice and building. The image is calm, almost sleepy. A quirky thing. One short clause says that if a man is caught lying with another man's slave woman, he pays 10 shekels and walks away. The earliest known mention of such a matter anywhere. Historians still argue whether these laws were truly used in court, or simply stood as a promise that the king watched over fairness the way the moon watches the night. The stele is set upright in the courtyard of Nippur, where people pass it every day on their way to leave barley offerings. The wind moves softly across the plain, and for the first time the idea of written law stands taller than any man. The rivers keep flowing, but the cities begin to listen to one voice. Around 2334 BC, a man steps out of the northern city of Akkad, bronze spear catching the low sun. His name is Sargon, once a cupbearer in the palace of Ur-Zababa of Kish, now king of a place no one had heard of a generation earlier. He speaks Akkadian, a Semitic tongue that sounds softer than Sumerian, like wind moving through dry grass. He marches south first. City after city opens its gates. Uruk, Ur, Lagash, Umma, each brick wall that once stood alone now stands inside a larger shadow. Then he turns east across the Tigris, takes Washukani, then south to the Gulf where his soldiers wash their weapons in the lower sea. Later he crosses the Zagros and looks toward the setting sun, reaching Mari and Ebla far up the Euphrates. One inscription says, "His empire stretched from the lower sea to the upper sea," meaning the Persian Gulf to the Mediterranean. He keeps the old Sumerian writing, but changes the language inside it. Scribes in Agade, his new capital, roll out long clay tablets, boasting that 5,400 men eat bread daily at the king's table, a number so round it feels like the hush of wind across an empty plain. A quirky thing. Sargon placed his daughter Enheduanna as high priestess in Ur, binding south to north with family as well as spears. Her hymns still carried his name long after the bronze had cooled. He moves governors like pieces on a game board, sons and trusted men sent to watch distant cities. Trade flows easier now. Cedar from Lebanon drifts down river on rafts. Tin from the east meets copper from Cyprus, and lapis keeps coming from the far mountains. The faint scent of cedar smoke travels farther than any army. Historians still argue whether Sargon truly created the world's first empire or simply tied together proud cities that later remembered themselves as one. The tablets call him King of the Four Quarters, a quiet way of saying the horizon itself had a master. Toward the end he grows old. Rebellions flicker like small fires in every province at once. The same cities that bowed now test the weight of the chain. He puts them down, but the effort leaves him tired. When he dies around 2279 BC, the realm stays stitched together for his sons Rimush and Manishtushu, and then for gentle Naram-Sin, who will dream even larger. At night, from the roof of a palace in Agade that has vanished under sand, you might have seen 1,000 campfires stretching away. Each one wants its own world, now answering to a single distant glow. The idea of one king over many lands has been born, and it will never quite lie down again. After the storms of Akkad have passed, the south gathers itself again, like quiet water finding its old level. Around 2112 BC, a man named Ur-Nammu has already begun something new. but it is his grandson Shulgi who truly makes the third dynasty of Ur shine. For almost 100 years, from 2094 BC to 2047 BC, the cities breathe in calm rhythm. The great ziggurat at Ur rises higher than ever, its baked bricks still warm from the day's sun when the moon climbs above the plain. Canals run straight and full, fields of barley stretch silver under moonlight, and the storehouses never empty. From Pusrish Dagon near Nippur come tens of thousands of clay tablets, careful counts of sheep, goats, oxen moving in and out like slow tides. In the cool shade of the Aduba, the tablet house, boys sit cross-legged copying the old poems. Gilgamesh wrestling the forest, Inanna walking the underworld, Enki filling the rivers with sweet water. Their reed styluses whisper across wet clay, and the stories feel new again. Shulgi himself claims he can run 100 miles from Nippur to Ur and back in a single day, a gentle boast scratched into a hymn that still makes scholars smile. A quirky thing, among the endless receipts for barley and oil, one small tablet records a monthly ration for Shulgi Simti, the beloved lady, and lists exotic gifts, lions, bears, even a mountain goat kept in the royal garden, like quiet pets. The kings call themselves God after her heart on the seals, yet they still write letters asking governors to send more reeds for the roof. Ibi Sin, the last of the line, watches the edges fray. Elamites drift closer from the east. Amorites settle softly on the western pastures, like dust that never quite leaves. By 2004 BC, the walls of Ur fall, the storehouses burn, and the great house collapses in a single tired sigh. The lamentation over Ur will mourn it for centuries. But for one gentle century, the old Sumerian language ruled again. The ziggurats stood proud, and scribes kept the past alive under the same low lamps that once lit Enheduanna's verses. The rivers keep flowing, carrying the faint scent of cedar smoke and the echo of old songs toward whatever comes next. The Nile moves slowly, the same river it has always been, dark water sliding past green banks, carrying the faint scent of wet earth and distant reeds. Around 3100 BC, two lands quietly become one. A king we remember as Narmer lifts a pallet of slate and shows himself wearing both crowns, the white one inside the red, like moonlight resting inside fire. From that moment there is only Egypt, upper and lower together. Time drifts on, calm as the current. By the third dynasty, around 2686 BC, a man named Djoser asks his builder Imhotep to raise something no one has tried before. At Saqqara, the step pyramid grows in 6 quiet stages, each terrace a little smaller, until it stands 200 feet above the sand that glows silver under moonlight. Inside, blue faience tiles line chambers that still smell of cedar smoke after 4,000 years. Then comes the 4th dynasty, the gentle century when stone learns to be perfect. Sneferu, first of the line, builds 3 great pyramids, one at Meidum that settles into itself like a tired hill, one bent at Dashur because the angle was too brave, and finally the Red Pyramid. Smooth and straight, its casing stones warm from the sun. He is learning for his son. In 2589 BC, Khufu simply says, higher. At Giza, the Great Pyramid rises 481 feet, 2.5 million limestone blocks, each one dragged on sledges over wet sand, while a quiet river of men chant the hours away. From the king's chamber, you could once see the whole valley breathing. Today, the same stones wait under the same stars, patient as water flowing over stones. Beside it, almost as tall, Khafre places his own pyramid and carves the Sphinx from a single outcrop, its face calm, wearing the striped Nemes headdress like a soft shadow. Menkaure follows with a smaller one, more modest, yet still wrapped in red granite brought all the way from Aswan on slow boats. The names sound like low wind across an empty plain. Khufu, Khafre, Menkaure, 3 shapes that will guard the horizon forever. Every morning the pharaoh wakes as Horus, every evening he becomes Osiris. The court moves with him, viziers in clean white kilts, priests shaving their heads smooth so nothing comes between skin and sky, scribes sitting cross-legged with reed pens and papyrus that smells faintly of the river. At Heliopolis the priests of Re watch the sun disk rise and set, counting the years by its steady journey. Workers live in neat grid towns near the pyramids, long dormitories, bakeries turning out thousands of loaves, breweries filling jars with thick beer. Fish bones and bread crusts lie under the sand where children once played with clay balls. A quirky thing, one crew called themselves Friends of Khufu, another Drunkards of Menkaure. Names scratched on the backs of blocks no one was ever meant to see again. Historians still argue whether the builders were slaves or free men working for wages and pride. The pay lists show barley, onions, and occasional new sandals. The same rations soldiers received. South at Abu Simbel and north at the Delta forts, the same belief holds everything steady. The king is God on earth. His body must travel west in perfect order, surrounded by boats and bread and beer that will never rot. Solar ships lie buried beside the Great Pyramid, cedar planks still smelling faintly of Lebanon, ready to carry him across the night sky. By 2494 BC, Shepseskaf, last of the Great Line, chooses a low mastaba instead of a pyramid. The fashion is already softening. The 5th and 6th dynasties build smaller, write longer texts on their walls, speak more gently to the next world. Unas carves the pyramid texts inside his chambers, spells that taste like cool water. The sky is yours, the earth is yours, the horizon is yours. Yet the river keeps giving. Fields flood and retreat on schedule, granaries stay full, trade boats drift north with gold from Nubia and south with incense from Punt. The kings marry their sisters to keep the blood pure, grow old under double crowns heavy as moonlight. And every evening, when the work gangs walk home along dusty paths, the 3 great shapes at Giza stand against the sunset, quiet, perfect, certain that tomorrow will come exactly as yesterday did. The old kingdom lasts 4 quiet centuries. Then the sun begins to feel a little farther away. The sun still rises over the same river, but something has changed. Around 2181 BC, the old kingdom quietly slips away, the way a long day slips into evening. The floods come weak and late, granaries stand half empty, and the great houses at Memphis no longer speak with one voice. Egypt breaks into gentle pieces, Heracleopolis in the north, Thebes far south along the Nile bend, and dozens of small kings between them, wearing little white crowns like moonlight on quiet water. This is the first intermediate period, 100 years that feel like a long sigh. Tombs at Saqqara are opened by neighbours, not strangers. The coffins are carried out under cover of night, and the gold quietly shared. In the dry grasslands west of the delta, Libyan families drift closer, trading cattle for grain. Asiatics settle in the eastern marshes, their sandals leaving prints beside Egyptian ones. Yet people still plant barley along the riverbanks, still tell children the old stories of Osiris cut and made whole again. At Muwala, a local lord named Anktifi writes on his tomb wall that he fed his city when others went hungry. The words are proud, but the tone is tired, like wind across an empty plain. Then, slowly, one family in Thebes begins to matter more. Around 2080 BC, Mentuhotep II stands in the cliffs at Deir el-Bahari and decides the two lands should wear one crown again. His soldiers move north along the river, not in great armies, just enough to open gates that were already waiting. By 2055 BC, he sits in the palace at Ich-Tawi, Caesar of the two lands, wearing both crowns the way Nama once did. Only now the crowns feel heavier. The Middle Kingdom wakes gently. The river returns to its old rhythm, the floods come full again, and the kings speak less of being gods and more of being good shepherds. Amenemhat I builds walls in the east called the Walls of the Ruler to keep the Sand People at a polite distance. Senusret III, 4 kings later, walks the same walls himself, eyes calm, voice low, and pushes the frontier south to the Second Cataract, where fortresses of mud brick rise like silent watchers over warm sand under moonlight. At Lahun and Hawara, pyramids return to smaller cores of mud brick wrapped in fine limestone that shines for a while before the casing is borrowed by later hands. Senusret II drains part of the Fayum, turning marsh into fields that smell of wet earth and growing wheat. Amenemhat III finishes the work and builds a temple beside the lake the Greeks will later call Moeris, its corridors still cool after 4,000 years. In the quarries of the Sinai and the gold mines of Nubia, men work under overseers who write careful letters home. One scribe named Hekenacht sends tablets to his family complaining that the children eat too much bread and the servant girl is lazy. Ordinary worries carried on clay, the colour of river mud. A quirky thing. Jewellers at Dashur bury 2 princesses, Knumet and Itikayet, with crowns so delicate the gold feels like warm sand held in the hand. The treasure stayed hidden until 1994, waiting quietly under a forgotten floor. Historians still argue whether the Middle Kingdom was truly stronger than the Old, or only more careful, more human. The kings write their stories on leather scrolls now. The tale of Sinuhe, who fled and came home. The shipwrecked sailor who met a kindly serpent. The words feel closer, like someone speaking across a small fire. By 1650 BC, the edges begin to soften again. Hyksos families with Canaanite names settle in Avaris and learn to ride chariots drawn by horses the river had never seen before. But for 4 quiet centuries the heart of Egypt beat steady and warm, telling itself it had learned how to break and mend. Far to the east, beyond the mountains that catch the last light, 2 quiet rivers carry silt the colour of warm sand. The Indus and the Sarasvati that once flowed full and is now only a ghost in the desert. Around 3,300 BC, small villages begin to line their banks. Mud brick houses set in careful rows, granaries raised on platforms so the air moves beneath. The monsoon comes and goes, steady as breathing. By 2600 BC, the cities appear, almost overnight, as if the plain decided to fold itself into perfect order. Mohenjo-Daro spreads along the Indus like a clean grid drawn with a calm hand. Streets straight as stretched rope, baked brick houses 2 and 3 stories tall, every wall the same thickness, every doorway the same width. No palaces, no great temples that shout, only a great bath sunk into a courtyard, 12 steps down to water that once reflected moonlight, and nothing else. Far north, Harappa watches the Ravi River with the same neatness, the same covered drains running beneath the streets, the same circular grinding stones left on doorsteps. Between them lie Kalibangan, with its ploughed fields still showing furrows after 4,000 years. Lothal, with its dock of Keline-fired brick, where the tide once rose and fell, and Dolavira, on an island of salt desert, its reservoirs catching every drop of rare rain. People wake early, sweep their courtyards, and walk to the well where the rope has worn the stone smooth. Water flows through terracotta pipes into private bathrooms, then out again through drains so perfectly sloped that nothing ever clogs. The air smells faintly of wood smoke and wet clay after the evening bath. They measure everything. Small cubes of polished chert serve as weights: 1, 2, 4, 8, 16 units, honest to the last grain. Merchants carry bronze scales in wooden boxes, weighing cotton that will travel west, carnelian beads the colour of fire, lapis from mountains no one here has ever seen. A unicorn seal presses its mark into soft clay tied around bundles, and the animal is really a one-horned bull seen from the side, but the name stuck like gentle laughter. A quirky thing. Children played with tiny carts pulled by terracotta oxen, wheels still turning after centuries under sand. Dice of baked clay waited on doorsteps for games we never learned the rules of. No one knows the names of their kings, if kings there were. The largest building at Mohenjo-Daro is only a granary with thick walls and wooden beams long turned to dust. Priests perhaps wore simple cotton robes. A small stone statue found in a courtyard shows a bearded man with half-closed eyes and a cloak over one shoulder, calm as quiet water over stones. They wrote on seals and potsherds, short lines of signs no one has ever read aloud. 400 symbols curve like seeds and fish and combs, messages carried in pockets, now silent. Trade moved softly. Boats with high prows sailed down the Indus to the sea, then west along the coast to the Gulf, bringing back shells and turquoise. Etched carnelian beads from Lothal turn up in royal graves at Ur, carried the same slow distance that cedar once travelled the other way. Historians still argue whether the cities answered to one gentle centre or simply agreed among themselves to keep the streets clean and the weights honest. Around 1900 BC, the rivers begin to shift. The Sarasvati dries to a line of wells. The Indus swings west. Monsoon rains grow shy. One by one, the cities empty. Roofs fall in. Wells fill with sand. The drains run dry. People walk away carrying what they can, leaving toys and grinding stones behind, like memories too heavy to lift. By 1300 BC, only small villages remain, cooking over small fires on the same bricks their grandparents fired. The great silence settles, soft as warm sand under moonlight. Yet the idea of perfect order, of streets that never needed a king's name, lingers longer than any wall. The yellow river winds slow and thick through the northern plain, its silt the colour of warm sand under moonlight, its mists rising soft in the morning. Around 2070 BC, a man named Yu stands on the banks and quietly finishes what his father began. Long channels cut to carry the floodwaters away instead of over the fields. Later stories will call him the Great Yu, founder of the Shang dynasty. But the earliest traces are only scattered villages and the faint scent of wet earth after rain. At Erlitu, south of the river near Luoyang, something larger begins to appear around 1900 BC. Wide, pounded earth platforms rise a little above the fields. Palace walls of Hangtu, rammed earth stand straight and clean. Bronze foundries glow low at night. Small plaques of jade shaped like dragons lie in the corners of elite graves, and the first bronze vessels simple jus cups for warming wine rest beside their owners. The site covers almost 300 hectares. Quiet, orderly, already a capital without a name we can read. Historians still argue whether Urlitu truly was the Shah capital of the later texts, or simply the first place where power learned to settle in one spot. Either way, the river keeps its secret. By 1600 BC, the centre has drifted east to the Huan River. At Yanshi, and then at Zhengzhou, thick walls of Hangtu, 10 metres high, circle towns the size of small cities. Inside, more bronze workshops hum softly, casting blades and ritual ding tripods that will ring when struck centuries later. The walls are built in sections by different groups, some stamped with simple marks, like distant campfires blinking across the plain. Then, around 1250 BC, a new place is chosen across the river, Yinshu, near Anyang. This is the first Shang capital we can touch with certainty. King Wu Ding and his wife Fu Hao rule from low palaces on raised platforms, their roofs thatched with reeds that whisper in the wind. Fu Hao leads armies north against the Gui Fang and returns with prisoners who walk quietly into the earth to serve her in the next world. Her own tomb holds 16 people laid around her. Bronze axes and jade dragons still cool after 3,000 years. A quirky thing. One oracle bone asks if the king's toothache will stop in 10 days. The crack said yes, and someone scratched, "It really did," beside the question. The yellow river mist still hides the beginning, but the dragon has begun to breathe bronze. The last capital of the Shang stands beside the Huan River at Yinshu, near modern Anyang, a low city of pounded earth walls and wooden pillars wrapped in thatch, quiet under the wide northern sky. From around 1250 BC to 1046 BC, 31 kings rule here, their names carved on bone. Wu, Ding, Zhu, Geng, Di, Yi, Di, Xin. The last will be called King Zhou in later stories, but for now he simply wakes each morning under the same pale sun. At dusk, the king sits in the great hall, lamps of bean oil flickering low. A diviner brings a polished turtle plastron, or the broad shoulder blade of an ox, already cleaned and thinned. The question is spoken softly. Will the harvest be good this 10th month? Should we attack the Qiang this spring? Will Lady Hao give birth in safety? A bronze-tipped rod, heated in charcoal, touches the back of the bone. Crack, a soft sound like ice shifting on a winter pond. The cracks are read by lamplight. Then the question and the answer are carved beside them in thin, careful strokes. Over 150,000 of these oracle bones have come out of the pits at Yinshu, the first true writing in East Asia. The same hands that write also cast bronze. In workshops just outside the palace precinct, clay moulds are built in pieces around a core. Molten bronze copper from the Yangtze, tin from the south, pours glowing into the channels, hissing faintly like distant rain. When the moulds cool and break away, a touty mask stares back, wide eyes, curved horns, mouth open in a silent roar that is somehow calm. Ding tripods stand on 3 legs, gooey bowls wait for millet. Dewy cups lift on slender points to warm wine over small fires. Some vessels carry short inscriptions. The king made this for Father Yi, a quiet line that still glows after 3,000 years. Fu Hao's tomb lies south of the river, small but rich. 16 people rest around her, dogs curled at her feet, bronze axes and mirrors laid carefully along the walls. Her own oval-eyed face looks out from a great axe, calm as moonlight on still water. A quirky thing, one oracle bone records the king dreaming of a bear entering the palace. The next day, a tame bear actually wandered in. and the scribes noted it with gentle wonder. The king hunts north, along the yellow river plains, chariots drawn by horses only recently brought from the steppes. The chariots are light-spoked wheels, leather harness, bronze fittings that shine like captured stars. Prisoners taken on these hunts sometimes walk home to serve the ancestors instead of their own families. Every 10 days the ancestors receive offerings in rotation. On Jayin Day it is grandfather. On Bingchen Day it is grandmother. The bronze smoke rises thin and steady, carrying the faint scent of roasted meat and millet wine across the rooftops. Historians still argue whether the Shang truly controlled all the land later legends claim, or whether their world ended a few hundred miles from Yinshu, fading into smaller towns that sent tribute and received bronze in return. By the reign of Di Xin, the oracle bones grow anxious. Questions come faster. Will disaster come this year? Will the Zhou attack? The cracks are read again and again, the answers carved smaller, as if the bone itself is running out of room. The river keeps its slow rhythm, mist rising each dawn, the same low fires burning in the foundries, the same quiet questions asked of heaven. Everything waits, patient as warm sand under moonlight. The two rivers have grown used to new voices. After Ur fell, the city spoke Amorite now, soft western words drifting in on the evening wind. Around 1894 BC, a small kingdom rises on the Euphrates bend where the water runs narrow and swift. Its name is Babylon. Little more than a market town at first, but the name already tastes like something larger. Hammurabi comes to the throne in 1792 BC, 6th king of the first dynasty of Babylon. He is young, patient, and listens more than he speaks. Year after year, his letters travel the trade roads. Polite clay tablets to Rimsin of Larsa, to Zimri Lim of Mari upriver, asking for news, offering daughters, sharing grain. Then, slowly, the letters change tone. In his 30th year he turns south, takes Isin and Uruk in one quiet season. 2 years later, Larsa opens its gates. By his 38th year, Mari itself falls, the beautiful palace of Zimri Lim, burned so gently that the painted walls still smile beneath the soot. The empire stretches from the Gulf to the bend of the Euphrates, a single shadow where dozens once flickered. Canals are cleaned, taxes counted in silver shekels, soldiers paid in barley from royal granaries. Caravans move safely along roads that smell of dry grass and cedar smoke carried from Lebanon. In the city square of Babylon, beside the temple of Marduk, a tall pillar of black basalt is set upright, nearly 7.5 feet of polished stone. On it, Hammurabi orders nearly 300 laws, carved in neat columns of Akkadian cuneiform. At the top he stands in low relief, hand raised, receiving a rod and ring from seated Shamash, the sun god whose eyes look straight ahead, calm as quiet water over stones. The laws speak plainly. If a man breaks another man's bone, his own bone is broken. If a house collapses and kills the owner's son, the builder's son is put to death. A doctor who saves a life earns 10 shekels, but if the patient dies, the doctor's hand is cut off. Prices are fixed. A boatman earns 2 sila of grain per day, a field hand 1. An adopted child may not be sent away empty-handed. A widow keeps her dowry. A tavern keeper who waters the beer pays a fine measured in silver. A quirky thing. One law says, if a man is taken captive and there is not enough food in his house, his wife may live with another man until he returns. But when he walks home, she must go back to him. No questions asked. The stone simply states it, like wind moving across an empty plain. Historians still argue whether these laws were daily practice or a grand promise that justice stood taller than any king. The stele is carried away centuries later by an Elamite king who sets it up in Susa as a trophy, where French archaeologists find it in 1901, still watching the passers-by who are no longer there. Hammurabi dies around 1750 BC. His sons rule gently at first, then weaker. The Kassites drift down from the Zagros like slow dust, and by 1595 BC, a Hittite raid from far Anatolia puts out the last lamp in Babylon for 4 quiet centuries. Yet every evening, somewhere along the Euphrates, a scribe still copies the old laws by lamplight, the words resting on clay like embers that refuse to cool. The pillar remembers. The world has grown wider, and the great kings speak to one another across mountains and deserts, the way neighbours once spoke across a village fire. Around 1600 BC, 4 courts watch the same sun rise and set. Thebes on the Nile, Hattusa in the high Anatolian bend, Washukani somewhere in the green Habur Valley, and Babylon farther south, now quiet under Kassite kings. Their chariots stand in long stables, horses stamping softly on clean straw, while scribes dip brushes in black and red ink to write polite, careful letters. In Egypt, the pharaohs of the 18th dynasty have pushed the southern border to Napata and the northern one deep into Syria. Thutmose I rides his chariot to the Euphrates itself and sets up a stele saying the river now belongs to his son Thutmose III. That son will earn the quiet name, the Napoleon of Egypt, though he never hurries. 40 years of steady campaigns leave 17 victory lists carved on the walls at Karnak, each one calm as water flowing over stones. Far north, in the rocky loops of central Anatolia, the Hittites have learned to speak the same diplomatic language. Suppiluliuma I sits in Hattusa around 1344 BC, city of stone walls and wooden gates, cool wind moving through the high passes. He writes to the Dowager Queen of Egypt. Her name is Ur-Nammu, widow of a young king who died too soon, offering one of his own sons as husband so the 2 lands may share the same shadow. The letter is gentle, almost shy. The prince is sent south, but never arrives. The road swallows him somewhere near the border. Between these 2 giants lies Mitanni, a kingdom of Hurrian speakers whose capital, Washukani, has never been found. King Tushratta sends letters sealed with beautiful cylinder seals of lapis and gold, asking for more Egyptian gold, because gold in Egypt is like dust. He marries his daughters to pharaohs, receives chariots and horses in return, and keeps the peace along the upper Euphrates. When Suppiluliuma finally turns east, Mitanni folds quietly. Its lands are shared like bread between Hittites and a growing Assyrian kingdom. The Amarna letters lie in clay baskets at Akhetaten, the short-lived city of Akhenaten. 350 tablets, some cracked, some perfect, carry the voices of vassal kings in Canaan. Abdi Heba of Jerusalem begging for 50 soldiers. Rib Hadda of Byblos writing 50 times until his ink runs thin. They all call the pharaoh my lord, my son, the way children once called the moon by name. A quirky thing. One small tablet from a Cypriot king complains that the Egyptian doctor sent to treat his sister has stayed away too long, and now the sister is dead. The words are sad, almost sleepy. Trade binds everything. Mycenaean pottery sails to the Levant in ships with black hulls. Uluburun sinks off Turkey in 1300 BC, carrying 10 tons of copper and 1 ton of tin, enough bronze for 100 swords, along with ivory, ostrich eggs, and a single gold scarab of Nefertiti. The wreck rests on the seabed like a quiet memory. Historians still argue whether these kings truly saw each other as equals, or whether every letter hid a clenched fist behind the open hand. At Kadesh on the Orontes in 1274 BC, Ramesses II and Muwatalli II meet with 20,000 men and 5,000 chariots. The battle is loud, but the treaty that follows 13 years later is gentle. Silver tablets in Babylon and Egypt promise good peace and good brotherhood forever. They exchange princesses, send doctors when someone falls ill, and carve the words on temple walls where the wind still moves softly across the stone. The great courts keep writing. Clay tablets travel in leather sacks, carried by donkey caravans that stop each night beside small fires. The scent of cedar smoke drifts from Lebanon to Thebes, from Hattusa to Babylon, binding the world in a single quiet breath. Everything waits, balanced like a lamp flame in still air. The Nile still flows the same way, only now its banks are lined with taller temples and longer rows of sphinxes. In 1279 BC, a young king steps into the light at Thebes wearing the blue crown. His name is Ramesses II, 19th king of the 19th dynasty, and he will sit on the throne for 67 quiet years, longer than any pharaoh before or after. He is 19 when he begins, 86 when he ends, hair still red from henna, eyes still sharp. He builds a new city in the delta, Pi Ramesses, House of Ramesses, wide avenues shaded by sycamore figs, stables for thousands of horses, workshops ringing with bronze. From there he rides north in his 5th year to meet the Hittite king Muwatalli II on the banks of the Orontes at Kadesh. The morning is warm, dust rises like slow mist, chariots wheel and turn. Ramesses stands in his own chariot, bow drawn, the reins tied around his waist the way all pharaohs learn. The day ends in a careful draw, neither side quite willing to claim the field. 13 years later he signs the world's first known peace treaty with Hattusili III, silver tablets sealed in both courts, promising friendship forever. Hittite princesses cross the desert to marry him, and he gives them Egyptian names, soft as moonlight on still water. Everywhere he goes, stone remembers him. At Luxor he lengthens the temple of Amun until the pylons stand taller than any before, their walls covered with the quiet story of Kadesh, his version calm and certain. At Karnak he raises the great hypostyle hall, 134 columns thick as cedar trunks, their capitals open like papyrus flowers catching the low sun. The air inside stays cool even at noon, smelling faintly of old incense and river mud. Far south, near the 4th cataract, he orders Abu Simbel carved from living sandstone. 4 colossal seated figures of himself, 65 feet high, watch the sunrise twice a year, slide across their faces and into the sanctuary where Ptah, Amun, Re-Horakti, and Ramesses deified sit in perfect darkness the rest of the time. Beside them, smaller statues of Queen Nefertari and a few of their many children stand quiet, barefoot on the warm stone. Twice, in modern times, the temples were cut into blocks and lifted higher when the Nile rose behind the Aswan Dam, yet the sunrise still finds the same faces on the same mornings. He marries at least 8 great wives and countless lesser ones. Nefertari receives a tomb in the Valley of the Queens, so gentle the paintings look, freshly done, her skin pale gold, her eyes lined with care. Iset Nofret bears him the crown prince Meneptah, and later princesses from Babylon and Hatti sleep in the harem palace whose gardens smell of lotus at dusk. A quirky thing. One small stela shows him playing senet with an invisible opponent in the afterlife, the board laid across his knees, a quiet smile on the stone face. Historians still argue whether he was the pharaoh of the Exodus, or simply the king whose long reign left more monuments than any other, so every later story borrowed his shadow. In his old age he sits on a cedar throne cushioned with leopard skin, joints stiff but voice steady. He orders the names of earlier kings recarved with his own cartouche, a gentle way of saying the past belongs to him now. When he finally lies down in KV7 in the Valley of the Kings, the tomb is already half filled with river silt, yet the face on his mummy still looks calm, teeth perfect, arms crossed, like a man taking an afternoon rest. The empire stretches from the Fourth Cataract to the Dog River north of Byblos, borders guarded by quiet forts and friendly treaties. Gold comes from Nubia in steady baskets, cedar from Lebanon on slow rafts, wine from the delta in tall jars painted with blue lotus. The world feels safe, wide, and warm. Ramesses dies in 1213 BC, 91 years old, and the long afternoon begins to cool. Across a quiet sea, the colour of deep wine, islands lie scattered like sleeping animals. Around 2700 BC, the first palaces rise on Crete: Knossos, Phaistos, Malea, Zakros. Low buildings of soft limestone and red-painted columns, open to the sky, courtyards catching the warm wind. No walls guard them, only the sea itself. In the West magazines, rows of tall pithoi stand like silent soldiers, full of olive oil that smells faintly of cedar smoke when the lids are lifted. Women in tight bodices and flounced skirts walk the corridors, hair long and loose, saffron dye glowing against bare shoulders. A fresco at Akrotiri on Thera shows them gathering crocuses into baskets, fingers stained yellow, while a ship with many oars waits below the cliff. Another painting has a young girl dancing, 1 foot lifted, eyes calm as moonlight on still water. At Knossos, the so-called Prince of the Lilies strides across a wall that crumbled long ago, lilies white against red plaster. The palaces burn and are rebuilt, larger each time. Around 1700 BC, an earthquake shakes the columns. By 1600 BC, the new Knossos spreads over 5 acres, staircases turning back on themselves. Storerooms holding 400,000 litres of oil and wine. Clay tablets in Linear A record every jar, every sheep, every worker. Short lines no one has ever read aloud. Far across the water, on the mainland, different voices begin to speak. Around 1600 BC shaft graves at Mycenae fill with gold. Masks pressed smooth over quiet faces. Bronze swords inlaid with leaping lions, cups of silver and electrum that once held dark wine. The kings wear long robes and boar-tusk helmets. Their wives rest under golden bees, and butterflies cut so thin they seem ready to fly. By 1400 BC, the lion gate rises at Mycenae. 2 lions carved in relief above the lintel, heads missing but bodies still proud. Inside, the palace sits high on the hill, Megaron with 4 columns around a central hearth, smoke drifting up through an opening in the roof. At Pylos and Tiryns the walls are so thick they call them Cyclopean, stones fitted without mortar, cool to the touch even at noon. Linear B tablets appear now, baked hard in the fires that ended the palaces. They speak Greek early, quiet Greek counting, chariots, bronze armour, perfumed oil for anointing guests. A scribe at Pyle Os writes, "Thus the watchers are guarding the coast, listing names of men posted along the shore, waiting for sails that never come in peace." Northwest, across the narrow sea, a small city looks out over the plain of Troy. Hisarlik, level VI, around 1300 BC, has strong walls and a tall tower facing the wind from the Hellespont. Pottery from Mycenae lies in the streets, a little Cretan jar rests in a corner. The city is rich, small, and perfectly placed between two worlds. A quirky thing, at Thera, the town of Akrotiri, is buried under soft white ash in 1628 BC. Walls still standing, beds left made, jars still sealed. Time simply stopped, gentle as a hand closing a door. Historians still argue whether the Minoan palaces were ruled by kings or by priestess queens, whether the great eruption of Thera ended their world or only bruised it, whether a single warlike people from the mainland took Crete or simply walked in when the doors were already open. The palaces fall quiet one by one. Knossos burns around 1375 BC, Pylos around 1180 BC, Mycenae a little later. The tablets record the last shipments of bronze, the last jars of oil, and then silence. The sea keeps its slow rhythm, carrying empty ships home. Yet the stories stay. A labyrinth under Knossos, a golden mask at Mycenae, a walled city that would one day be called Troy. They wait under warm sand and quiet water, patient as the moon moving across an empty plain. The year is somewhere near 1200 BC, and the wind feels different. From the west, ships with high prows and bird-head stems slide along coasts that once knew only traders. Egyptian records call them the Sea Peoples: Peliset, Jekka, Shekelesh, Denyen, Weshesh, names that drift across the water like smoke. Where they came from, no tablet says for certain. Some from burned islands, some from hungry plains north of the Danube, some simply from everywhere the grain had run out. Ugarit, on the Syrian coast, writes one last letter. The king of Ugarit tells the king of Alashia, Cyprus, that the enemy ships have already taken the towns along the shore, that his own fleet is away in Hittite waters, that he is alone. The clay tablet is baked hard in the fire that ends the palace. The last words are quiet, almost apologetic. Hattusa, high and cold in Anatolia, empties first. The great stone city of Superluliuma and Hattusili is left to the wind, granaries burned, archives scattered. A clay tablet found in the ruins speaks of grain sent to relieve famine in the capital, then nothing. The Hittite Empire simply folds like a tent when the last rope is cut. Down the coast, palace after palace catches the same soft flame. Mycenae, Tiryns, Pylos, Thebes, all the megarons with their painted hearths go dark within a generation or two. Linear B stops being written. The watchers on the coasts never send their reports. At Pylos, the last tablet lists 300 rowers sent to Pleuron and never heard from again. In the Levant, Megiddo and Hazor burn, Lachish and Ashdod fall quiet. Trade stops as suddenly as a lamp turned down. The copper road from Cyprus to the mainland breaks. Tin no longer reaches the smelters. Bronze becomes memory. Only Egypt still stands, but barely. In his 8th year, 1177 BC, Ramesses III meets the Sea Peoples on land and sea. At Jahi, on the coastal road, he lines up chariots and infantry. Off the delta mouth, his archers shoot from ships with lion-head prows. The reliefs at Medinet Habu show prisoners with feather crowns and long swords, bound gently, almost politely. The Peliset and Tejeka settle in the south of Canaan, becoming the Philistines of later stories. The rest drift away like smoke. A quirky thing, among the wreckage of a ship off Cape Geladania sails a merchant carrying a private hoard, scarabs of Ramesses II, a bronze goddess still warm to the touch, a little notebook of Cypriot signs, scratched on a clay tablet. The sea closed over him quietly. Historians still argue whether drought emptied the fields first, whether earthquakes shook the palaces, whether the sea peoples were invaders or refugees, or whether everything simply grew too heavy for the old ways to carry. The lights go out almost together. From the Balkans to the Nile bend, from Sardinia to the banks of the Orontes, the great courts fall silent within 50 or 60 years. Writing stops in most places, cities shrink to villages, bronze is hoarded and recast into iron when the secret finally arrives. Yet the night is not empty. Small fires still burn on the same hills, only lower and farther apart. The stories change key, but do not stop. A potter in Philistia paints a bird on a jar. A smith in Cyprus learns to work iron that comes from the ground instead of far ships. A family in the ashes of Ugarit walks south and remembers the old songs. The long Bronze Age settles like warm sand under moonlight, and the world waits for whatever dawn comes next. The smoke has settled, and the world is smaller now, quieter. Around 1200 BC, the great palaces are gone, the roads overgrown, the sea lanes empty. Yet every morning small fires still glow on hillsides that once looked down on bronze-armed kings. In the northern Mesopotamian plain, a city named Ashur wakes slowly. The Assyrians have waited in the shadow of stronger neighbours for centuries, trading grain and quiet prayers to their storm god. By 1100 BC kings, like Tiglath-Pileser, I ride out from Ashur's double walls, crossing the Euphrates on boats of inflated skins, hunting lions in the western grasslands. Their annals speak softly of 40 campaigns, of cedar brought back from Lebanon, of tribute counted in silver and horses. The empire is small yet, but the voice is already steady. Farther west, along the narrow coast between mountain and sea, 3 little cities begin to matter more than their size. Tyre, Sidon, and Byblos send cedar logs and purple cloth across the water on round ships with high prows. The purple comes from murex snails gathered in shallow bays. One dye works at Sarepta needs 10,000 snails for a single gram of colour that never fades. The Phoenicians write in a new alphabet of 22 soft signs, scratching bills of lading on papyrus that smells faintly of cedar smoke. Their merchants reach as far as Spain for silver and Cornwall for tin, leaving quiet footprints on every shore. In the southern hills of Canaan, something gentler is growing. Around 1200 BC, small villages appear on the ridgetops, simple houses with 4 rooms and a courtyard, stone pillars holding up flat roofs. No palaces, no walls, just collared rim jars and terraces climbing the slopes. Archaeologists call this Israel in its beginning. At Shiloh, a modest sanctuary keeps the ark of a god named Yahweh, carried on poles when the people move. By 1000 BC, the villages have grown into a loose gathering of tribes, judges rising when danger comes, then fading back into the olive groves. A quirky thing. At Tel Kassili, near modern Tel Aviv, a small Phoenician temple from the 11th century holds a tiny lion-headed cup, someone's quiet offering to a goddess who watched both sea and hill. Kings begin to matter again. Around 1000 BC, Saul walks the hills, tall and troubled, chosen by a prophet named Samuel beside a quiet well. David follows first a shepherd with a sling, then a captain, then king in Hebron, and finally in the small Jebusite town he renames Jerusalem. Solomon, his son, builds a cedar temple on the hill, its walls lined with gold that catches lamplight like warm sand under moonlight. When Solomon dies around 930 BC, the kingdom splits gently in 2. Israel in the north with 10 tribes, Judah in the south holding Jerusalem and the hills around it. Historians still argue whether David's kingdom was large and golden or small and rough. a chiefdom of villages that later stories polished smooth. Across the water, on Cyprus and Crete and Sardinia, the same quiet rebuilding happens. Iron is everywhere now, cheap, hard, made in little bloomeries that glow red at night behind every village. The alphabet drifts west on Phoenician ships, landing softly in Greece around 800 BC. 22 signs that will one day carry Homer's voice. The night sky feels lower, closer. Small fires burn on 1,000 hills, each one its own world again. Prophets speak in the villages. Merchants count purple cloth by lamplight. Assyrian scribes copy old lists onto fresh clay. Nothing is grand yet, but everything is beginning. The rivers keep flowing, carrying the faint scent of cedar smoke toward mornings no one has seen. The Tigris runs low and steady, and a new city rises on its eastern bank. Around 880 BC, Ashur-Nasir-pal II moves the Assyrian capital to Kalhu-Nimrud. Today, walls 8 kilometers around, a palace of cedar beams and ivory inlay, Lamassu bulls with human heads and eagle wings standing quiet at every doorway. Their eyes follow you down long corridors that smell faintly of cedar smoke. The kings no longer wait for trouble to come to them. Tiglath-Pileser III, in 745 BC, tightens the reins. Provinces instead of vassal kings, standing armies that march every spring, roads kept open by fear and by the steady tread of booted feet. He takes the northern kingdom of Israel in 722 BC. Samaria falls after 3 slow years, and the 10 tribes vanish into the resettlement cities east of the Zagros quiet houses, new names, old stories carried in the heart. Sargon II builds Dur-Sharrukin in Khorsabad square and perfect, its walls painted white and black like a chessboard seen from the sky. He dies on campaign, and the city is left half-finished, a gentle reminder that even the strongest hand can loosen. Then comes Sennacherib. In 701 BC he walks south to Judah. Lachish falls, its walls carved forever on the palace reliefs at Nineveh. Little figures climbing ramps, little figures walking away into exile. Jerusalem pays heavy silver and stays standing, a small fire left burning on a hill. Esarhaddon follows, quiet and thoughtful, rebuilding Babylon after his father broke it, sending scribes to copy every tablet they find. He dies on the road to Egypt in 669 BC, and his son Ashurbanipal takes the throne, last great king of the line. In 663 BC, he rides all the way to Thebes, the ancient city of Ammon, and leaves it quiet. His library at Nineveh gathers 25,000 clay tablets, myths, medicine, star lists, letters from worried governors. The scribes work by lamplight, the air cool and dry. A quirky thing. One tablet records a total lunar eclipse on a certain night in 669 BC. Predicted months ahead, noted calmly as it happened, the moon turning the colour of warm sand under moonlight. Historians still argue whether the empire ruled by terror alone, or whether the roads, the post stations, the steady grain supply made many people willing to bow. The kings count their conquests on tall prisms of clay. 50 cities, 100 cities, 200. Winged bulls watch from palace doorways, stone beards curled, 5 legs so they seem to walk when you move past them. Reliefs line the walls' soldiers with pointed helmets, captured kings kneeling, rivers of tribute flowing toward the throne. Yet every night, the same small lamps burn in village houses, far from Nineveh. The same low voices tell children the old stories. The empire is vast, but the world is still made of small fires. Ashurbanipal dies around 627 BC, and the throne begins to wobble. His sons quarrel, the army grows tired, Babylon and Media look up from their long patience. The great palaces wait, cedar roofs already sagging, Lamassu still watching corridors, no one walks anymore. The Tigris keeps flowing, carrying the faint scent of cedar smoke toward a morning the bulls will never see. Nineveh falls in 612 BC. The great walls crack, the Lamassu topple, and the Tigris carries the smoke south. From the ashes a new Babylon rises, quiet but proud. Nabopolassar, an old Chaldean general, crowns himself king in the ruined city and begins to sweep the dust from the streets. His son Nebuchadnezzar II takes the throne in 605 BC and decides the city should shine again. He rebuilds the walls wider and higher than ever, blue glazed bricks catching the low sun like still water over stones. The Ishtar Gate stands tall, lions and dragons marching along its sides in yellow and white against deep lapis, the processional way leading straight from the river to the heart of the city. Every spring the statues of gods are carried along this street on golden boats, the air filled with the faint scent of cedar smoke and roasted barley. North of the palace he raises the Etemenanki, the great ziggurat, 91 meters square, 7 stages, stepping up to a small temple at the top where the priests watch the stars move across the plain. They say it was the Tower of Babel in later stories, but to the Babylonians it was simply the foundation of heaven and earth. Somewhere in the palace gardens, perhaps on the roof, perhaps beside the walls terraced plantings, climb high, watered by chains of buckets lifted from the Euphrates. Greek writers will later call them the Hanging Gardens, one of the 7 wonders built for a Median wife who missed her mountains. The bricks still drip cool water in the evening heat, date palms and fruit trees breathing softly above the city. In 597 BC, and again in 587 BC, Nebuchadnezzar walks south to Judah. Jerusalem's walls come down, the temple Solomon built is emptied, and families travel the long road east with what they can carry. They settle by the quiet canals of Babylon, among willow and poplar, and begin to write their sorrow into psalms. A quirky thing, a small clay tablet from the palace records rations for Jehoiachin, king of Judah, and his 5 sons, simple lines of barley and oil given every month, a quiet kindness carved in cuneiform. Historians still argue whether the Hanging Gardens truly stood on vaults above the city, or whether the memory simply grew greener with distance. Nebuchadnezzar dies in 562 BC, the blue gate still shining, the gardens still dripping. His successors rule only a few short years. In 539 BC, a Persian army slips into the city along the dry riverbed, while the guards drink at a feast, and Babylon opens its gates without a sound. Yet every night for a little while longer, the glazed lions watch the moon rise over the rooftops, and the water keeps falling softly from terrace to terrace, cool and steady as a heartbeat. The road from Jerusalem to Babylon is long and dusty, and the families walk it twice, once in 597 BC, again in 587 BC. They settle by the Chebar Canal, among slow water and tall reeds, in places called Tel Abib and Al Yehudu. Date palms rustle overhead. The same wind that once moved through Judean olive groves now carries the faint scent of cedar smoke from distant temple fires. At first they sit on the canal bank and hang their harps in the willows. Psalm 137 remembers the ache. How shall we sing the Lord's song in a strange land? Yet the songs do not stop. They change key, grow deeper, Sabbath becomes a quiet circle around small household lamps instead of a crowded temple court. Stories, once told by priests in Jerusalem, are now written down on leather scrolls, carefully, so nothing is lost. A man named Ezekiel stands among them, eyes far away, speaking of wheels within wheels and a valley of dry bones that slowly stand and breathe again. Another voice, the one we call Deutero-Isaiah, lifts words of comfort. The grass withers, the flower fades, but the word of our God will stand forever. The exiles copy the lines by lamplight, the ink still smelling of river water. A quirky thing. Clay tablets from a Babylonian banking house list ordinary Judean names. Shelomith, Benaiah, receiving barley and oil, living quiet lives beside their neighbours. Historians still argue exactly when the Torah took its final shape, but the exile is the quiet room where the pieces settle into one scroll. In 539 BC, Cyrus of Persia opens the gate. Many stay by the canals, merchants now, scribes, farmers. Others pack their scrolls and walk home under the same moon that watched them leave. The temple is gone, the kingdom is gone, but the book is beginning, and it will outlast every empire that ever carried them away. The year 539 BC comes quietly. Cyrus II, king of Persia, rides into Babylon while the priests open the gates and the people lay down green branches. The great city that once carried Judah away now bows to a man who calls himself king of the four corners of the world. On a clay cylinder still warm from the kiln, he writes that Marduk himself chose him to restore the temples and send every captive home. In Jerusalem, the exiles read the words and begin packing. Cyrus has come far. From the small highland town of Anshan, he took Media in 550 BC, Lydia and its golden king Croesus in 546 BC, then Babylon without breaking a single blue brick. His tomb at Pasargadae is simple. A small stone house on 6 steps, the roof still open to the stars. Inside, a golden coffin once rested beneath a quiet inscription. I am Cyrus, who founded the Persian Empire and was king of Asia. Grudge me not this monument. He dies in 530 BC on a campaign beyond the Oxus, and his son Cambyses adds Egypt in 525 BC, walking barefoot into Memphis so the priests feel respected. Cambyses dies strangely, and for a moment the empire holds its breath. Then Darius, a distant cousin, takes the throne in 522 BC after a short, silent struggle. He carves the story on the rock at Behistun, 3 languages, high above the road, so every traveller can read how he restored order. From there he sends surveyors to measure the world. The royal road stretches 2,700 kilometres from Susa to Sardis. Way stations every 14 miles where horses wait fresh and riders carry sealed letters that never stop. A message travels the whole distance in 7 days, the dust still warm behind the hooves. The empire is gentle in its vastness. 20 satrapies pay silver and horses and grain, but keep their own gods, their own laws, their own quiet fires. In Egypt, Darius finishes a canal from the Nile to the Red Sea. In Judah, he funds the rebuilding of the temple, finished in 516 BC. In Ionia, he lets the Greek cities argue among themselves, so long as the tax arrives. Persepolis rises on a wide terrace in the Persian homeland. Begun by Darius around 518 BC, columns of fluted stone lift roofs of cedar brought from Lebanon, their capitals shaped like calm bulls and lions. Staircases carry low reliefs of every nation, bringing gifts, Medes in round caps, Egyptians with tall jars, Indians leading elephants that never quite reach the top step. The air smells faintly of cedar smoke and warm stone at evening. A quirky thing. In the foundation deposits beneath the Enheduanna palace, Darius buried gold and silver tablets, declaring in 4 languages that this house will stand as long as the sun moves. Historians still argue whether the Persian kings truly believed all gods were faces of Ahura Mazda, or simply understood that peace is cheaper than constant war. The king sits on a throne carried by representatives of every people, a quiet picture carved above every doorway. Immortals, 10,000 spear-bearers with golden pomegranates on the butt of their spears stand guard in the palace courts, their name meaning only that when one falls, another steps forward at once. From the Indus to the Nile, from the Caucasus to the first cataract, one road, one post, one king. At night the relay fires blink across the mountains, small steady lights saying the empire is awake and listening. Darius dies in 486 BC, the terrace at Persepolis still growing, the road still open. His son Xerxes will walk it west with 1,000,000 footsteps. But the empire has already learned how wide the world can be under one quiet sky. The rivers keep flowing, carrying the faint scent of cedar smoke from one horizon to another. Across the narrow sea, the Greek cities have been talking to one another for centuries, small voices carried on salt, wind. By 500 BC, there are hundreds of them scattered along the coasts and islands. Sparta, with its red cloaks and quiet discipline, Corinth with its 2 harbours, Athens with its silver mines at Laurion and its restless assembly on the Pnyx hill. Each city keeps its own gods, its own walls, its own way of speaking to the night. In 499 BC, the Ionian cities along the Anatolian shore rise against Persian rule. They burn Sardis for a moment, then ask the mainland for help. Only Athens sends 20 ships and Eretria 5. The revolt lasts 5 years and ends in smoke at Lade in 494 BC. But the great king in Susa remembers the names. Darius sends heralds west in 491 BC, asking for earth and water. Most cities give them quietly. Sparta throws the messengers down a well and tells them to take it themselves. Athens does the same at the Barathron pit. The war has already begun. In 490 BC, Datis and Artaphernes sail across with perhaps 25,000 men and land on the plain of Marathon, 26 miles from Athens. Miltiades leads 10,000 Athenians and Plataeans out at dawn, the hoplite line stretching thin to match the longer Persian wings. They run the last furlong in full bronze, shields overlapping like quiet water over stones. By evening the beach is calm again. 6,400 Persians counted on the sand, 192 Greeks carried home on their shields. A runner named Phidippides races the news to Athens and falls silent. 10 years later, Xerxes comes himself. In 480 BC, the royal road carries him west, bridges of boats lashed across the Hellespont, a canal cut behind Mount Athos, so the sea stays gentle. The army drinks rivers dry, the dust rising like slow mist behind 1,000,000 footsteps. At Thermopylae, a narrow pass between mountain and sea waits for 300 Spartans under Leonidas, 700 Thespians, some Thebans, and others perhaps 4,000 in all. They hold 2 days against the tide. Then a local man shows the Persians a mountain path at night. On the 3rd morning Leonidas sends most away and stays with his 300 and a few hundred more. When the sun is high, the pass grows quiet again. A stone lion will stand there later, carved with the simple words, "Go tell the Spartans, stranger passing by, that here obedient to their laws we lie." the Persians march on. Athens is empty, the people carried to Salamis and Trozen on ships. The wooden walls Themistocles trusted bob gently in the strait. In late September 480 BC, the narrow water between island and mainland fills with triremes. The Persians crowd in, oars tangling, bronze rams finding hulls. By dusk 300 Greek ships row home through calm water, 200 Persian ones do not. The next year, 479 BC, the war ends on land. At Plataea, Pausanias the Spartan leads perhaps 40,000 Greeks against Mardonius and his remaining army. The morning is warm, spears glitter, the plain smells of dry grass. When the dust settles, the Persian camp is quiet, the road east open again. The same summer, off Cape Mycale, on the Ionian coast, Leotychidus burns the Persian ships beached beneath the olive trees. The Ionian cities rise once more, this time to stay free. A quirky thing, the serpent column from Delphi, 3 twisted bronze snakes, holding a golden tripod, still stands in Istanbul today. Its head's long gone, but the names of 31 Greek cities still curled around its coils. Historians still argue how many men truly stood at Thermopylae or rode at Salamis. The numbers grow softer with every telling, but the story stays sharp. The Persian wars last only a few seasons, yet they leave the small Greek cities standing alone under their own stars, suddenly certain they can choose their own tomorrow. The sea keeps its slow rhythm, carrying the faint scent of cedar smoke from burning Persian ships toward mornings no empire will rule again. The war smoke drifts away, and Athens breathes deep. In 454 BC, the treasury of the Delian League is carried from Delos to the Acropolis, 5,000 talents of silver resting quietly behind the old temple walls. Pericles stands in the assembly and speaks in a low, steady voice. The money will build something. The gods themselves will walk past without envy. By 447 BC, the first blocks of Pentelic marble rise on the Acropolis. The Parthenon grows slowly, 46 outer columns, 8 across the ends, every drum cut so perfectly that no mortar is needed. Inside, Phidias shapes a 40-foot statue of Athena Parthenos, ivory skin, gold dress weighing 44 talents, eyes of polished stone that catch lamplight like quiet water over stones. The Propylaea gateway follows, then the small temple of Athena Nike, then the Erechtheion with its porch of maidens standing calm under the weight of the roof. Below the hill, the agora hums gently. Socrates walks barefoot among the stalls, asking a potter what justice is, asking a general what courage is, always the same quiet question until the answer feels new. Anaxagoras sits in the shade, explaining that the moon is a rock, not a goddess, and the sun are white-hot stone words that drift across the wine shops like the faint scent of cedar smoke. In 461 BC, Pericles persuades the assembly to let even the poorest citizen serve on juries for a small payment of 3 obols, enough for bread and lentils. The courts fill with ordinary voices. 6,000 citizens are chosen by lot each year to guard the laws. The theatre of Dionysus seats 14,000 on stone benches worn smooth by generations of sandals. Aeschylus has already died, but Sophocles and Euripides still bring new plays every spring. Oedipus walking the road alone, Medea standing very still with terrible calm. A quirky thing, a voting shard from the agora carries the scratched name Pericles, son of Xanthippus. Someone once thought even the golden man should spend 10 years away from the city. Historians still argue whether this was true democracy. or only the rule of 5 or 10,000 adult men among a city of 300,000 souls. In 431 BC, the long peace begins to fray. Sparta marches. The Peloponnesian War starts like a slow fire no one quite knows how to put out. In the second year, the plague slips inside the walls with refugees from the countryside. Pericles speaks at the public funeral, voice calm, saying the city is worth everything, then dies quietly of the same sickness in 429 BC. Yet the building goes on a little longer. The temples shine white against the blue sky, the marble still warm from the day's sun when the moon rises. Barefoot thinkers still ask their questions under plane trees that smell of dry grass after rain. The Golden Age lasts barely 30 years, a single breath in the long night. But the questions asked beneath those columns, the plays watched on those stone seats, the statues standing quiet on the Acropolis, they will echo longer than any empire. The sea keeps its slow rhythm, carrying the faint scent of cedar smoke toward mornings still unborn. In the cool hills of Macedon, a boy is born in 356 BC, while the temple of Artemis at Ephesus burns far away. His name is Alexander, son of Philip II, and his mother Olympias tells him the lightning that struck the palace the night he came was a sign. At Pella he learns to ride before he can read well, listens to Aristotle under plane trees that smell of dry grass, and watches his father turn a rough kingdom of shepherds into a machine of bronze and spear. Philip falls to an assassin's blade in 336 BC, and the 20-year-old stands suddenly alone before the army. 2 years later, in 334 BC, he crosses the Hellespont with 35,000 men and throws a spear into Asian soil, claiming it as a gift from the gods. At the Granicus River, the first Persian satraps come against him and drift away like smoke. He walks south along the coast, untying the Gordian knot with one calm stroke of his sword, then turns inland. At Issus in 333 BC, Darius III waits with a host that darkens the plain. Alexander charges straight at the great king's chariot, the line behind him following like wind across an empty plain. Darius turns and rides east, leaving his mother, wife, and daughters beneath the Macedonian tents. Tyre resists for 7 months until a mole of stone and timber reaches the island walls. In 332 BC, the city opens, and Alexander walks barefoot to the temple of Melkart, offering quiet thanks. Gaza falls next. Then Egypt opens its arms. Memphis crowns him pharaoh, and at Siwa the oracle of Ammon speaks softly in the cool sanctuary. Son of Zeus. In 331 BC he crosses the rivers again and meets Darius one last time at Gaugamela. The moon turns red the night before, but the phalanx holds. The companions ride, and the Persian centre breaks, like quiet water, over stones. Darius flees once more, and is killed by his own satraps near the Caspian. Alexander covers the body with his own cloak, and sends it home for royal burial. Babylon welcomes him with flowers, Susa with gold, Persepolis with open gates. He burns the palace in a night of wine and memory, then rides east through the Hindu Kush passes still white with snow. In 327 BC, he marries Roxanne, daughter of a Bactrian lord, beneath a sky wide as the world itself. The army crosses the Indus in 326 BC and meets King Porus on the Hydaspes. Rain falls heavy, the ground turns soft, elephants stand like moving towers. Alexander waits, then crosses upstream at night and rolls the Indian line like a carpet. Porus surrenders on horseback, tall and calm, and Alexander gives him his kingdom back, larger than before. At the Hyphasis River the men sit down, 12 years of marching, boots worn through, homes only a rumour, they weep openly, and Alexander weeps with them in his tent. 3 days later he turns west. A quirky thing. Somewhere in Gedrosia, the army drinks from a spring that tastes of frankincense, and the men remember it for the rest of their lives. He dies in Babylon in 323 BC, 32 years old, fever burning quiet in the palace of Nebuchadnezzar. When they ask who the empire belongs to, he whispers, "To the strongest." The room grows still. The soldiers file past the body for days, the same faces that once followed a boy across the Hellespont, now older, sun-dark, silent. 11,000 miles lie behind them, from Greece to India, one lifetime of footsteps. The world he stitched together will tear gently at the seams, but the thread is already in the cloth forever. Alexander is gone, but the world he opened stays wide awake. From 323 BC onward, his generals divide the empire like quiet airs around a lamp. Ptolemy takes Egypt and builds a new city where the Nile meets the sea. Alexandria, streets laid straight as spear shafts, a lighthouse rising 300 feet so ships find the harbour even on moonless nights. In the palace quarter, Ptolemy founds the library and the Museon. By 280 BC, scrolls already number hundreds of thousands, stacked in cool rooms that smell faintly of cedar smoke and old papyrus. Eratosthenes measures the earth with shadows at noon in Syene and Alexandria, calculating the circumference to within a few hundred miles. Aristarchus looks at the stars and quietly says the sun stands still while the earth circles it, a thought too large for most ears. Euclid writes the elements in neat lines that will guide builders and dreamers for 2 millennia. Eastward, Seleucus rules from the Tigris to the Indus. He founds cities everywhere, Antioch on the Orontes, Seleucia on the Tigris, and dozens more named Antioch or Seleucia or Laodicea, so the map feels familiar to a Greek traveller. In the new towns, gymnasiums open under Aegean suns. Young men oil their skin and run races while old Persian nobles watch from the shade, curious but calm. At Icannum on the Oxus River, far beyond the Hindu Kush, a Greek theatre seats 6,000 on a hillside facing the river. A stone inscription quotes Delphic maxims. As a child, be well behaved. As a youth, self-controlled. In middle age, just. As an old man, wise. At death, without sorrow. The same river that once saw Alexander's campfires now carries Greek words on its banks. A quirky thing. In a house at Icannum, someone copied a philosophical dialogue on papyrus and tucked it under the floorboards. Only the last lines survive, speaking gently of the soul's quiet journey. Historians still argue how deeply Greek ways took root, whether the cities were islands of homesick soldiers or real bridges between worlds. In Pergamon, the Attalid kings pile scrolls higher than Alexandria for a while, and build an altar to Zeus, whose frieze winds like a slow river of stone. In Bactria, Greek kings ride with Buddhist monks along the same dusty roads, silver coins showing helmeted kings on one side and standing Buddhas on the other. The Greek language drifts everywhere, soft as warm sand under moonlight, carrying Homer and Euclid and new medical texts from the school at Kos. Markets from the Black Sea to the Red Sea speak Koine now, the same simple words Alexander's soldiers once used around campfires. The world grows larger and smaller at the same time. A merchant in Alexandria can buy pepper from India, amber from the Baltic, frankincense from Arabia, and pay with coins showing Ptolemy's calm profile. Libraries breathe quietly in 6 cities, scrolls unrolling like slow rivers of thought. The age lasts 3 gentle centuries. Then a new power begins to walk east from Italy, steady as dawn. The Tiber bends gently around 7 low hills, and on one of them, around 509 BC, the last king is sent away. The men of Rome decide they will never again answer to one man for life. 2 consuls will be chosen every year, and the Senate old farmers in plain togas will speak first in every matter. The city is small, yet wooden houses, dirt streets, a marsh where the forum will one day be. By 264 BC, Rome rules most of Italy south of the Po. Across the narrow Sicilian Strait, Carthage still holds the western sea old Phoenician city of round harbours and tall ships, its merchants counting silver from Spain and tin from far islands. A quarrel over Messana lights the spark. The First Punic War lasts 23 long years. Rome learns to build fleets overnight, loses hundreds of ships to storms, yet keeps launching more. In 241 BC, the last Carthaginian admiral sails home, and Sicily becomes the first province. Hamilcar Barca swears his young son Hannibal to eternal enmity on a quiet altar. In 218 BC, Hannibal, now 38, leads 37 elephants and 50,000 men over the Alps. Snow falls thick, the path narrow, the animals slipping on ice that shines like moonlight on still water. He comes down into Italy with half his army and wins at Trebia, at Lake Trasimene, at Cannae. 80,000 Romans gone in one summer afternoon. The greatest single loss Rome will ever know. For 15 years he wanders the south, a guest no city dares refuse. Rome refuses to treat, keeps raising new legions from the same tired fields. In 202 BC, Scipio sails to Africa, burns the Carthaginian camp at night, and meets Hannibal on the plain of Zama. The elephants panic, the Roman line holds. Carthage asks for peace. Hannibal walks home across the sea he once ruled. A quirky thing. The Senate orders the books of Numa, the old peaceful king, buried again when they are accidentally found too Greek, too soft for the new Rome. 50 years later, in 146 BC, Rome ends the story twice in the same spring. Corinth is emptied, its stones scattered, and Carthage is ploughed with salt after 100 days of street-by-street waiting. The western Mediterranean lies quiet under Roman tax collectors. The farmers who left their ploughs in 264 BC come home changed men. They have seen elephants and marble cities, tasted African dates and Spanish wine, brought back scars and stories. Their sons will speak of the sea as a Roman lake, the Senate already looking east toward the kingdoms grown rich while Rome was busy learning how to win. The Tiber keeps flowing, carrying the faint scent of cedar smoke from distant Punic ships now burning quietly on the horizon. The Republic is old now. Its joints ache from too many wars and too much silver flowing into too few hands. By 60 BC, 3 men meet quietly in the shadows of great houses. Pompey with his eastern triumphs, Crassus with his quiet mountains of money, Caesar with his debts and his calm smile. They agree to share the year like brothers sharing a cloak. The first triumvirate is never written down, only felt in every vote the Senate takes. Caesar draws Gaul as his province. From 58 BC to 50 BC he marches the legions north and west, crossing the Rhine on a bridge built in 10 days, twice crossing the Grey Sea to Britain, where the cliffs glow white under moonlight. At Alesia, in 52 BC, he builds 2 rings of walls, one to keep Vercingetorix in, one to keep the relief army out, and the Gallic fire finally settles into quiet ash. He comes home in 49 BC with only the 13th legion. At the Rubicon, a small river no wider than a farm ditch, he pauses long enough to say, Alea iacta est. The die is cast, then steps across. Pompey sails for Greece the same night. Pharsalus, in 48 BC, ends it one sharp morning on a dusty plain. Pompey's line breaks, and he rides east until an Egyptian dagger finds him on a lonely beach. Caesar lingers in Alexandria, walking the lighthouse steps with Cleopatra rolled in a carpet at his feet. Their son Caesarion is born, while the city smells of cedar smoke from burning ships in the harbour. He returns to Rome, dictator for life, calendar reformed, coins bearing his living face for the first time. On the Ides of March, 44 BC, he walks to the theatre of Pompey without his guards. 60 senators rise around him, with small daggers hidden in their togas. He falls at the base of Pompey's statue, 23 quiet wounds, the Republic breathing its last with him. Mark Antony speaks over the body in the forum, holding the torn and blood-stained toga high. Octavian, 19 years old and pale, arrives from Apollonia to claim the name Caesar, the second triumvirate, Octavian, Antony. Lepidus meets on an island near Bononia and calmly writes death lists. Cicero's name is on them. His hands and head will rest on the rostra where he once spoke so freely. Antony winters with Cleopatra in Egypt, golden couches, pearl dissolved in wine. In 31 BC, the final fleet meets off Actium Octavian's smaller ships against Antony's tall ones. The sea is calm, the day long, and when Cleopatra's sail appears on the horizon, Antony follows. The battle ends almost before it begins. The Republic sighs once, very softly, and is gone. The eagles still fly, the legions still march, but they march for one man now. The Tiber keeps flowing, carrying the faint scent of cedar smoke from funeral pyres that will never quite go out. The forum is quiet now, the blood washed from the stones, the daggers hidden again. In 27 BC, the young Octavian, 26 years old, pale, calm, stands before the Senate and gives back all his extraordinary powers. The senators, remembering Caesar's fate, refuse the gift. They call him Augustus instead, the revered one, and let him keep the army while pretending the Republic still breathes. He smiles gently and accepts. He closes the gates of the Temple of Janus for the first time in 200 years. The bronze doors stay shut, while grain ships sail safely from Egypt to Ostia, while the legions stand watch along the Rhine and the Danube, while merchants walk the roads without fear of bandits. From 27 BC to 180 AD, the Pax Romana spreads like moonlight across an empty plain 2 centuries when a traveller could cross from Britain to the Euphrates with the same silver coins in his purse. Rome itself changes face. Augustus finds a city of brick and leaves it clothed in marble. The Campus Martius fills with cool porticos and theatres. The Arapacis rises beside the river quiet reliefs of children and laurel branches. The imperial family walking as calmly as farmers home from the fields. On the Palatine his own house stays modest, only the view is grand. He reforms the calendar once more, adding the month of August so his name sits beside Julius forever. He boasts, quietly, that he found Rome brick and left it marble, and that he never lost a war he began. In 9 AD, Varus leads 3 legions into the Teutoburg forest and does not come out. 19,000 men vanish under oak and rain. Augustus walks the palace corridors at night crying, "Varus, give me back my legions." The Rhine becomes the border and stays there. A quirky thing. On the coast of Campania, a modest villa at Capri will later belong to his successor Tiberius. But under Augustus, the island is still only a quiet retreat, smelling of pine and salt. Historians still argue whether he truly restored the Republic, or simply wrapped one man's will in old words, so gently no one noticed the difference. He dies in 14 AD at Nola, 75 years old, whispering to friends that if he played his part well they should give him applause. The body travels slowly home along the Via Appia, while the empire waits, patient as warm sand under moonlight. The gates of Janus stay closed a little longer. Roads stretch straight across mountains. Aqueducts carry water to cities that never knew thirst. Legions keep watch from Hadrian's Wall to the Red Sea. Grain is cheap, wine is plentiful, the same laws rule from the Atlantic to the Euphrates. 200 years of guarded peace begin with one young man's quiet voice saying, "Enough." The world remembers the name Augustus the way it remembers the first small fire someone carried out of Africa long ago. Something warm, something that changed everything. The Tiber keeps flowing, carrying the faint scent of cedar smoke towards centuries still sleeping. The empire is wide, and the roads are straight. Stone highways laid so carefully that a wagon's wheels hum the same note from Hadrian's Wall to the Syrian desert. By the year 100 AD, more than 80,000 kilometers of Via Appia, Flaminia, Aemilia carry letters, wine jars, and quiet travelers under the same low sun. Milestones count the distance in Roman miles, each one a small white lie that says the world is measured and known. In Rome itself, 1 million people wake before dawn. Bakers slide loaves into beehive ovens, the smell of warm bread drifting up narrow staircases where families sleep 6 to a room. Water runs clear in the Aqua Marcia, built in 144 BC and still flowing sweet under Trajan. Children chase hoops through the Subra while senators in clean togas walk the sacred way toward the Forum, sandals clicking on stones worn smooth by 1,000 years of footsteps. Out in the provinces, the same Latin is spoken with softer accents. At Volubilis in Morocco, olive presses turn. At Timgad in Algeria, retired legionaries farm neat squares of wheat. At Londinium merchants count British wool beside the cold Thames. A boy in Dura Europos, on the Euphrates, learns his letters on wax tablets, the same alphabet his cousin uses in Taraco, on the Spanish coast. In Pompeii, frozen gently in 79 AD, the streets still remember a summer day. Wall paintings show quiet gardens and floating villas. Bakeries hold 70 carbonized loaves. A surgeon's house keeps bronze tools laid neatly on a table. Graffiti on a tavern wall reads, "I screwed the barmaid." Another says, "Successus loves Iris." Ordinary voices caught mid-breath. The army keeps the peace with 28 legions, 150,000 men in red tunics and iron helmets. A soldier signs up for 25 years, earns 300 denarii a year, saves for the bronze diploma that will make his children citizens. Auxiliary camps along the frontier smell of leather and pine smoke. The men playing dice under lamplight, while the Danube or the Rhine murmurs nearby. A quirky thing. In a barracks at Vindolanda, near Hadrian's Wall, a birthday invitation, written on thin wood, asks a friend to come celebrate 2 women chatting across a rainy province in perfect Latin cursive. Historians still argue how Roman the provinces really became, or whether the empire simply taught the world to speak with one quiet tongue while keeping its own songs at home. At night the cities glow with olive oil lamps, the roads fall silent except for the occasional creak of a late wagon. From Syria to Spain, the same silver denarius buys bread, the same laws decide quarrels, the same gods sometimes wearing local faces watch from small household shrines. 2 centuries pass like one long evening around a steady fire, warm, safe, almost ordinary. The roads keep humming, carrying the faint scent of cedar smoke and distant oceans toward nights the empire believes will never end. The long afternoon begins to cool, and the empire shivers. In 235 AD, a quiet Thracian soldier named Maximinus is hailed emperor by the Rhine legions after they quietly end the Severan line. The Senate in Rome bows, uneasy, and the 50 years begin 50 years, when 26 men will wear the purple, most of them for months or weeks, most ending with a sword slipped gently between ribs. The borders crack open. Across the Rhine and Danube, Alemanni, Goths, and Franks drift south like slow shadows. In the east, a new Persian king, Shapur-I, rides west and takes Antioch in 260 AD, leading Emperor Valerian away in golden chains, the first Roman emperor ever captured alive. The great road from Italy to Syria fills with refugees carrying what they can. Coins grow lighter every year. Silver washes out of the denarius until it is only a thin film over copper, and prices climb like smoke. A soldier's pay buys less bread, and the legions begin to choose their own emperors, men who promise full sacks and full bellies. Gallienus rules from Milan for 8 years, fighting on every frontier at once, his beard already grey at 40. Cities pull inward. Rome itself builds the Aurelian walls. Between 271 and 275 AD, 12 miles of brick and stone, hurried up while the plain outside waits. Old temples are robbed for ready-cut blocks. The roads grow quiet except for the creak of army wagons. In 260 AD, the empire breaks into 3 gentle pieces. Postumus rules Gaul, Britain, and Spain from Trier. Odenathus of Palmyra holds the east for Rome, until his widow, Zenobia, quietly takes the title Augusta in 267 AD and crowns her son Vabalathus. Only Italy, Africa, and the Balkans still answer to Gallienus, and even there the purple changes hands like a hot coal. A quirky thing. A small hoard of silver coins buried near Lyon in 270 AD carries the calm face of Postumus on one side and a 2-headed Janus on the other, someone hoping both doors would stay closed. Historians still argue whether the crisis was plague, climate, or simply the weight of too much world on too few shoulders. Then, slowly, strong hands reach out. Aurelian, hard and tired, takes the throne in 270 AD. In 5 short years he walks the empire back together, defeats the Goths, brings Zenobia to Rome in golden chains. She will later lay down herself, crushes the Gallic pretender Tetricus. He begins restoring the temple of Sol Invictus and is murdered by his own officers in 275 AD before the paint dries. The thunder keeps rolling, Probus, Diocletian, waiting just beyond the horizon. 50 years of storm leave the fields empty, the cities smaller, the coins thin. Yet every night small fires still burn in farm courtyards. Mothers still sing the same lullabies, and the roads broken, patched, quiet still point toward Rome. The empire bends almost to breaking, but does not quite snap. The rivers keep flowing, carrying the faint scent of cedar smoke and distant alarms toward mornings no one can yet see. The storm is almost spent, and a hard-handed Illyrian soldier steps forward. In 284 AD, Diocletian, son of a freedman, takes the purple at Nicomedia and decides one man can no longer carry the whole sky. In 293 AD, he chooses Maximian as Augustus in the west, then adds 2 Caesars, Galerius and Constantius Chloroso. 4 men hold the world like 4 steady pillars. The Tetrarchy is born, Diocletian in Nicomedia, Maximian in Milan, Galerius in Sirmium, Constantius in Trier. Each keeps a court, an army, a purple cloak, but all answering to the senior Augustus, whose face already looks carved from the same stone as his statues. He fixes prices with the edict on maximum prices in 301 AD, long lists carved on market walls telling bakers and boatmen what they may charge. Coins are recalled and restruck heavier, taxes gathered in grain and cloth instead of thin silver. The frontiers bristle with new forts. The legions split into border troops and mobile field armies that can ride where the wind blows hardest. In 303 AD, the Great Persecution begins. 4 edicts order churches closed, scriptures surrendered, sacrifices made to the old gods. Some provinces obey gently, others hardly at all. The smoke rises thin and brief. In 305 AD, Diocletian does what no emperor has ever done. At Nicomedia, he lays down the purple. On the same day, Maximian does the same in Milan. They retire Diocletian to a quiet palace at Split, where he grows cabbages and refuses to come back, even when the empire begs. The pillars wobble at once. Constantius dies in York in 306 AD, and his soldiers hail his son Constantine. Civil war drifts across the empire like slow clouds until 312 AD, when Constantine marches south against Maxentius. At the Milvian Bridge, he sees something in the sky later. He will call it a cross of light above the sun, and orders the Chi-Rho painted on every shield. The battle ends in the Tiber's muddy shallows, Maxentius gone, Constantine alone in the west. In 313 AD, he meets Licinius at Milan, and together they promise that every man may worship as his heart tells him. The Edict of Milan is gentle, almost sleepy, yet it changes everything. Churches begin to rise on public land, bishops sit with governors, the old temples grow quiet. In 324 AD, Constantine defeats Licinius at Chrysopolis and stands alone. He chooses an old Greek town on the Bosporus Byzantium and begins to build. By 330 AD, the city is ready. Broad colonnades, a golden milestone marking the centre of the world, a Senate house for men who never quite feel Roman. He names it New Rome, but everyone already calls it Constantinople. He builds the Church of the Holy Apostles to hold his own future tomb, and the great church of Hagia Sophia, whose first dome will fall and be rebuilt higher. The city smells of fresh-cut marble and cedar smoke from 1,000 workshops. A quirky thing. In the Hippodrome, he sets up an Egyptian obelisk taken from Karnak, its base carved with Greek words, saying it was raised in 30 days by magic, Proconesian stone and Roman ropes, nothing more. Historians still argue whether Constantine truly saw the vision or simply read the wind that was already blowing. He dies in 337 AD on Pentecost weekend, baptized at last in a white robe, the empire divided among his 3 surviving sons. The old gods still have temples, but the future has already moved east. The roads still hum, the legions still march, only now many shields carry the quiet sign of the cross. The Bosporus keeps flowing, carrying the faint scent of cedar smoke and new incense toward mornings, the old Rome never imagined. The year 376 AD feels colder than most. Across the Danube, a great many Goths stand on the northern bank, asking to be let in. The emperors Valens and Valentinian agree, thinking they will settle quietly as farmers and soldiers. 2 years later, at Adrianople in 378 AD, those same Goths meet Valens on a hot August day, and the Roman army simply melts away. Valens disappears in the dust, the first emperor to fall to barbarian spears in 600 years. The tide has turned, slow and patient as quiet water over stones. In 406 AD, the Rhine freezes hard, and Vandals, Suevi, and Alans walk across on the ice, carrying children and cattle into Gaul. 4 years later, in 410 AD, Alaric the Visigoth camps outside Rome. The gates open from inside, perhaps by slaves, perhaps by tired citizens, and his men walk the streets for 3 gentle days, taking gold and marble statues, but leaving most houses standing. The city has not felt foreign footsteps since 390 BC. Across the provinces the legions fade. Britain is told in 407 AD to look to its own defence. The last coins minted there carry the plea, "Restore the Republic." In Spain the Suevi settle softly in the northwest. The Visigoths drift south. The Vandals sail to Africa in 429 AD under Gaiseric and take Carthage 10 years later. From there they launch small fleets that keep the western Mediterranean nervous. In Italy itself, real power slips into the hands of men who wear animal skins over Roman armour. Flavius Odoacer, a Herulian officer, watches the boy emperor Romulus Augustulus play in the Ravenna palace. In 476 AD, he sends the purple robe and diadem east to Constantinople with a quiet message: the West no longer needs its own emperor. The Senate agrees, the army agrees, and the last Western emperor, 16 years old, name echoing the city's founder, simply steps aside. No one marks the day with trumpets. The world just keeps turning. The East looks on calmly. Constantinople still pays its taxes, still feeds its million mouths, still sends gold to keep the Huns quiet. Attila rides west in 451 AD, turns aside at the Catalonian plains when Aetius stands with Visigoths and Franks beside the last Roman banner, then dies 2 years later in his sleep after a wedding feast. The Hunnic storm breaks as quickly as it gathered. A quirky thing, in a villa near Piazza Armerina in Sicily, beautiful mosaics from the early 4th century show girls in bikinis playing ball life so ordinary that even the end of the world barely disturbs the afternoon. Historians still argue whether Rome fell or simply changed clothes. The aqueducts still run for a while, the baths still steam, senators still write letters in perfect Latin while Visigothic kings sign documents with a shaky cross. Latin turns slowly into the soft country tongues that will become French, Spanish, Italian. The great roads grow grass in the cracks, but villagers still walk them to market. In 507 AD, Clovis the Frank defeats the Visigoths at Vouillé and begins to stitch Gaul together under one Christian king. In 533 AD, Justinian sends Belisarius west to reclaim Africa from the Vandals, then Italy from the Ostrogoths. Ravenna's mosaics shine for a little longer. Justinian and Theodora calm in gold and pearl before the Lombards drift down in 568 AD and the western light dims again. Yet every evening small fires still burn in the same courtyards where legionaries once diced. Farmers speak Latin with a country accent. Priests copy scripture in candlelight. A Frankish noble learns to read Virgil beside his sword. The great theatres stand empty. But children play among the columns, and the marble still feels warm under moonlight. The Western Empire does not crash. It settles, like dust after a long day, into 1,000 small kingdoms that still remember the old name. The Tiber keeps flowing, carrying the faint scent of cedar smoke and distant memories toward mornings that will call themselves something new. The Bosporus shines silver at dawn, and a new emperor wakes in the sacred palace. Justinian I takes the throne in 527 AD, a Thracian peasant's son with dark eyes and a quiet voice, married to Theodora, who once danced on the stage and now walks beside him in stiff purple robes. Together they decide the empire can be wide again, the old sea Roman once more. In Constantinople they tear down the old church Constantine built and raise Hagia Sophia. Between 532 and 537 AD, Anthemius of Tralles and Isidore of Miletus lift a dome 180 feet high on 4 great arches, so light it seems to hang from heaven by a golden chain. 40 windows circle the base, sunlight pouring in like warm sand under moonlight. On the opening day, Justinian walks the marble floor and whispers that he has outdone Solomon. The law lies scattered in 1,000 dusty scrolls. Justinian sets Tribonian and 10 quiet scholars to work. By 534 AD, the Codex Justinianus gathers every valid law, since Hadrian, the digest, condenses 2,000 books into 50. The institutes teach young students in 4 calm volumes. One law for one empire, written plain enough for any judge to read by lamplight. In 532 AD, the Nika riots almost end everything. Blue and green chariot factions burn half the city, shouting Nika victory, while the dome of Hagia Sophia still rises unfinished. Justinian thinks of sailing away, but Theodora stands in the council chamber and says she would rather die in purple than live without it. Belisarius closes the hippodrome doors and the shouting stops. 30,000 lie quiet in the streets, and the rebuilding begins before the ashes cool. Westward, Belisarius sails with a small fleet. In 533 AD, he lands in Africa and takes Carthage in one gentle campaign, the Vandal kingdom gone in a season. In 535 AD, he crosses to Sicily, then up the Italian boot. Ravenna falls in 540 AD, its mosaics still glowing with the calm faces of earlier emperors. Rome changes hands 5 times, but the Ostrogothic king Witiges is led in chains to Constantinople, and the senators who survived come home barefoot. Spain yields a southern strip in 552 AD, the Mediterranean almost a Roman lake again. Yet the armies are thin, the taxes heavy. The plague that strikes in 541 AD empties cities faster than any war. Italy lies half ruined, its aqueducts broken, its fields untended. A quirky thing. In the church of San Vitale in Ravenna, Justinian and Theodora stand forever on opposite walls, offering bread and wine to Christ while courtiers in stiff robes look on. The same year, the Goths still held the city. Historians still argue whether Justinian renewed the empire or only spent its last strength on a beautiful dream. He dies in his bed in 565 AD, 73 years old. Hagia Sophia's great dome, still perfect, above the city. The West slips away again almost at once, but the law and the church he built will walk farther than any legion. The Bosporus keeps flowing, carrying the faint scent of cedar smoke and distant incense toward mornings that will speak Greek and pray in New Rome. The rivers still run the same way. The Nile, the Euphrates, the Tiber, the Yellow River, carrying silt and memory toward the same quiet sea. We began beside a small fire in East Africa around 170000 years ago, a handful of people looking up at the same moon that watches us now. From there the footsteps spread, slow and patient, across warm sand under moonlight, across frozen rivers, until every continent held small circles of lamplight and the first stories were told in soft voices. At Göbekli Tepe in 9600 BC, someone raised 20-ton stones into circles before fields were ever ploughed, as if the need to gather and remember came before bread. In the same centuries, barley and wheat bowed gently in the hills of the Fertile Crescent. Goats and sheep walked into villages, and the long partnership between people and food began. Cities followed Jericho with its round tower, Çatalhöyük with its painted rooms, then writing on clay in Uruk around 3100 BC, the first quiet marks that let a voice travel farther than breath. Bronze rang for the first time in the royal graves at Ur in 2600 BC, and soon after pharaohs raised stone mountains at Giza, while Sargon marched from Akkad, and the Indus cities kept perfect drains. China's first capitals rose beside the Yellow River, oracle bones cracked at Yinshu, and the same centuries saw Knossos open to the sky and Mycenae guard its gold behind lion gates. Empires learned to breathe and die. Hammurabi set his laws on basalt in Babylon. The sea peoples scattered the palaces in 1200 BC, and iron began to sing in village forges. Assyria filled its palaces with winged bulls. Nebuchadnezzar walked beneath blue lions. Cyrus opened the gate for the exiles, and Darius measured the world with a royal road. Then the small Greek cities stood alone at Marathon and Salamis in 490 and 480 BC, asked impossible questions beneath the Parthenon's calm columns, and sent Alexander riding east until the Hyphasis turned him home in 326 BC. His world spoke Greek, from Egypt to the Indus. Libraries breathed in Alexandria, and Roman legions learned the taste of elephants at Zama in 202 BC. Caesar crossed the Rubicon in 49 BC, fell on the Ides of March in 44 BC, and Augustus closed the gates of Janus in 27 BC for 2 long centuries of guarded peace. Roads hummed, aqueducts carried water to 1,000,000 mouths, and the same silver coin brought bread from Britain to Syria. Plague and thin coins shook the 3rd century. Diocletian divided the purple among 4 men in 293 AD. Constantine saw a sign above the Milvian Bridge in 312 AD and planted a cross in Constantinople's soil in 330 AD. The West settled gently into new hands in 476 AD when Odoacer sent the purple robe east, while Justinian dreamed the old sea whole again beneath Hagia Sophia's floating dome in 537 AD. The dream faded, but the law, the roads, the story stayed. Everything we are, our laws and letters, our bread and wine, our questions about justice and the stars, began in those small circles of firelight and walked here one quiet footstep at a time. The same hands that once cupped the first flame later carved the Parthenon frieze, wrote the digest, painted the Sistine ceiling, typed these words you are hearing now. The chain is unbroken, thin as moonlight, strong as the rivers that still carry silt to the sea. Somewhere tonight a child falls asleep to a story, and the circle is complete again. From the first spark in an African night to the light on your small screen, nothing essential has changed. We gather, we speak, we remember, we pass the fire along. The rivers keep flowing. The faint scent of cedar smoke still drifts on the evening wind, and the long human story settles gently, like warm sand under moonlight, waiting for whatever quiet morning comes next.